For weeks, something has been ending. You don't know what. You can't point to it. You've tried to name it to someone and the words didn't come. It's not grief. It's not anxiety. It's something quieter and more final than either of those. That's not random. On February 20th, Saturn and Neptune aligned at 0 degrees Aries, the first degree of the entire zodiac. These two planets come together once every 36 years. The last time was 1989. Since that alignment, the structures that gave your days their shape have been slowly coming apart. 4 days later, Mercury turned retrograde in Pisces and kept your mind in a loop of the unfinished and the unresolved. It hasn't turned forward yet. Tomorrow night, March 18th, at 9:23 p.m. Eastern, a new moon forms at 28 degrees Pisces. Mercury and Mars are both standing beside it, but that's not what makes tomorrow different. The 36-year cycle that started dissolving in February doesn't just pause at a new moon. At 28 degrees Pisces, the last stretch of the zodiac, it goes completely dark. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 3 things. First, what actually changed on February 20th and why you felt it before you understood it. Second, why the 36-hour window before tomorrow's new moon is not empty, and what your body is already doing inside it. Third, 3 actions tied to exactly 9:23 p.m. tomorrow. Not to begin something new, but to close what has been dissolving for 36 years. What you've been feeling has a name. Tonight it reaches its point. There's a pressure that doesn't announce itself. It settles somewhere between your throat and your sternum, not sharp, not spiking. Not the kind that builds or moves, just steady. Present long enough that you've stopped registering it as unusual. You haven't been anxious. Anxiety has a direction. It points at something specific and demands resolution. What you've been carrying has no direction. It doesn't point at anything. It sits. Some nights you've woken between 2 and 4 in the morning, not from a dream, already awake, already inside a thought, a situation from months ago, something you were certain was finished. Your mind is back inside it before you've fully surfaced. You wait. Sometimes it recedes, sometimes it doesn't, and the room slowly lightens around it. There is a decision you've been postponing for at least 3 weeks. You know exactly which one. Not a small adjustment, the kind that, once made, changes the shape of how your days begin. You've turned it over, you've approached it from different angles, you haven't moved. This is not procrastination. When the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for labeling internal states and closing open narratives, operates under sustained low-grade stress, its activity measurably drops. After 45, the effect intensifies. The brain under chronic load doesn't process unresolved sequences toward completion. It replays them, cycles them through memory circuits repeatedly, attempting resolution that doesn't arrive. The thought that returns at 3 a.m. without asking, the decision that won't reach its end. These are documented neurobiological patterns, not signs of confusion, not failures of will. You cannot name what you're feeling because the mechanism for naming is running below capacity. That is not a metaphor. Right now, the moon is less than 3% illuminated. Not as a poetic image, as an astronomical measurement. This phase has a precise name: balsamic moon, defined as the period when the moon falls within 45 degrees of angular distance from the sun, closing toward conjunction. The Enuma Anu Enlil, cuneiform tablets compiled in Babylon around 1000 BCE, among the oldest astronomical records in existence, cataloged this phase separately. They called it Bubbly, the day of the moon's absence, not an ending, not a beginning, a gap between 2 states. Tomorrow night, at 9:23 p.m. Eastern, this phase ends. This feeling didn't start tonight. There is a specific date when it arrived. Once you have that date, what you've been carrying for the past few weeks stops being nameless. The date is February 20th. You may not have marked it, most people didn't, but something in the structure of your days began shifting around that time. Not dramatically, not all at once. A familiar routine that felt suddenly hollow. A role you'd held for years that no longer fit the same way. A morning structure you'd relied on without thinking until it stopped holding. That is not coincidence. That is Saturn meeting Neptune. On February 20th, at 0 degrees 45 minutes of Aries, Saturn and Neptune formed an exact conjunction, the same degree of sky, for the first time in 36 years. Saturn governs structure, the scaffolding of daily life, the roles and routines that give your days their shape. Neptune governs dissolution, the slow process by which solid things become permeable. When these two meet, structure doesn't collapse, it becomes uncertain. You can still move through it, but it no longer holds the same weight it did. The last time this happened was 1989, in Capricorn. That year, the Berlin Wall fell. The Soviet Union began its final unraveling. Physical borders dissolved. Systems that had organized millions of lives became, within months, historical. The dissolution in 1989 was external. It happened in architecture, in maps, in institutions visible from the outside. In 2026, this conjunction sits at 0 degrees Aries. The last time Saturn and Neptune met in Aries was 1702, 324 years ago. And that particular degree carries a specific designation, the Aries point. Astrologer Robert Hand has documented it as the degree where planetary events most directly intersect with collective, lived experience, not as abstraction, but as something felt in the body of the person watching. This time, the dissolution is not in borders or buildings. It is in the structures inside you. 4 days later, February 26th, Mercury stationed retrograde at 22 degrees 33 minutes of Pisces. Mercury governs how the mind sequences and closes. Pisces is the one placement where Mercury's capacity for clear movement is most compromised. Thoughts loop. Decisions lose their edges. The prefrontal cortex was already running below capacity from the Saturn-Neptune pressure. Mercury added a second layer. 3 weeks where the mechanism for moving forward was stalled. There is something you were about to decide before February 20th, a direction you were close to taking. Since then, it has circled, not disappeared, circled. That is not a character flaw, it is a configuration. In less than 14 hours at 9:23 p.m. Eastern, Mercury stands beside the Moon for the first time since it turned back. That loop has a closing point, but Saturn and Neptune are the background. Mercury is the loop. Tomorrow, a third thing happens, and it doesn't just close this cycle, it closes 360 degrees of the zodiac. Most people know new moon as a beginning, the start of a fresh cycle, a point of initiation. That is accurate. Every new moon does begin a lunar month, but this one is different, not because of what it starts, because of where it sits. Tomorrow's new moon forms at 28 degrees, 26 minutes of Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, the 12th, the end of a full rotation. The next new moon after tomorrow falls in Aries, the first sign, a different element, a different nature entirely. Tomorrow is not simply the start of a new lunar month, it is the last reset before the zodiac completes its entire circuit. That is not a metaphor, that is geometry. Right now, as you hear this, the moon is moving toward that point at approximately ½ degree per hour. The distance between its current position and 28 degrees 26 minutes Pisces is measurable and shrinking. The Enuma Anu Enlil, cuneiform tablets compiled in Babylon around 1000 BCE, recorded separate omens for the closing degrees of each zodiacal sign. They described 28 and 29 degrees as the space where the old quality has already departed and the new one has not yet arrived. They called it the threshold without a master, not transition, gap. But the degree is not what makes tomorrow unusual. At 9:23 p.m. Eastern, 3 bodies occupy the same region of sky simultaneously: the Moon, Mercury retrograde, and Mars. Mars in Pisces is in classical debilitation, the placement where its essential nature operates at its most compromised. Mars governs will and forward movement. In Pisces, that will lose its traction. It pushes without finding ground. You've felt this. Not uncertainty about what to do, but an inability to move toward it. Mercury, still retrograde, carries the 3-week loop of everything unresolved. The Moon gathers them both at the exact moment of darkness. This is not symbolic. This is 3 measurable bodies at one coordinate. The last time a Saturn-Neptune conjunction was active and a new moon fell in Pisces simultaneously. This did not occur in 1989. On March 7th of that year, a Pisces new moon did form, but Saturn and Neptune were in Capricorn, far from the Aries point. The configuration present right now has no equivalent within living memory. By the time most people go to sleep tonight, the moon will already be inside that threshold. The window before 9:23 p.m. Eastern is not empty. Your body is already doing something inside it, even if you haven't named it yet. Between now and 9:23 p.m. tomorrow, there are 36 hours. 4 signs are feeling this land in a specific area of their life right now. And if your sign isn't among them, there is still a precise point in your chart where this closes. 4 signs are feeling this most directly, not because they were chosen, because of geometry. When a new moon forms at 28 degrees Pisces, it automatically activates the mutable cross, the 4 signs that stand in exact 90-degree and 180-degree relationships to that point. Conjunction, opposition, square. These are angular relationships, not interpretations. If your sun, moon, or rising sign is one of these 4, the pressure you've been carrying has a specific address in your life. Pisces. The new moon lands in your first house, the house of the body, identity, and self-definition. What is dissolving is not a circumstance, it is a version of yourself. The role that gave your days their shape, partner, professional, parent, has been shifting, and the new definition hasn't arrived yet. Saturn and Neptune pressing from your second house add another layer, not just who you are, but what you stand on. The question under the pressure is not what to do next, it is who is doing it. Virgo, the opposition. This new moon falls directly across your chart in the 7th house, the house of long-term partnership, the person or agreement that mirrors you. Something in that structure has been losing definition since February. You may already know what it is. You may not have said it aloud yet. The closing point is not inside you. It is in what stands across from you. That conversation, that distance, Gemini, the square. Pressure lands in your 10th house. Career, public role, how the world registers you. What you've been doing professionally may still be functioning, but it no longer feels like yours. The gap between your outer role and your inner direction has been widening. The square doesn't mean collapse, it means friction, and friction that has been accumulating for 3 weeks has a release point at 9:23 p.m. tomorrow. Sagittarius, the second square. This lands in your 4th house, the foundation. Home, family structure, the place you expected to hold. Aging parents, adult children, the shape of home changing in ways you didn't initiate. The pressure comes from below, from exactly where you expected support. The ground is shifting, and the shift didn't ask your permission. For every other sign, find which house in your natal chart contains 28 degrees Pisces. That house is where this new moon lands. That is where the 3-week loop closes, and that is where the 36-hour window is open right now as you hear this. Right now, the moon is already moving through the last degrees of Pisces. It reaches 28 degrees 26 minutes at 9:23 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. That is the closing point for everything described in this video. Knowing where the pressure lands is not the same as doing something with it. There are 3 steps tied to this window, not to open something new, but to close what is already closing consciously before it simply disappears on its own. You are already inside the window. It opened in February when Saturn and Neptune aligned and the structures began their slow dissolution. It has been narrowing since. Right now, not tomorrow, not later tonight, the moon is crossing the final degrees before disappearance. Less than 3% of its disk is visible. That is not a poetic threshold. It is a measurable minimum in a cycle that has been running for longer than any living record. Your body knows this without being told. The balsamic moon phase, this specific geometry of moon within 45 degrees of the sun, affects circadian biology through a mechanism that has nothing to do with belief. Moonlight in the pre-digital world was a primary regulator of nocturnal light exposure. At minimum illumination, melatonin production is influenced by the shift in ambient light. The body registers the reduction. sleep becomes lighter. The threshold between waking and dreaming gets thin. If you've been waking between 2 and 4 in the morning with a thought already in motion, this is partly why. After 50, cortisol levels drop significantly in the hours past midnight, removing the buffer that keeps the brain's default mode network from cycling through unresolved material. The prefrontal cortex, already running below capacity, loses its ability to suppress replay. The hippocampus returns to unfinished sequences with increased intensity precisely when external stimulation is lowest. The balsamic moon is astronomical silence, and your brain responds to it. The Enuma Anu Enlil tablets, Series 70, tablets compiled over several centuries in Babylon, recorded the bubbly phase not as a time for action or decision. Babylonian astronomers observed that decisions made during this window were frequently reconsidered after the new moon. Not reversed, reconsidered, returned to. Their instruction was not mystical, it was observational. During this phase, note what is open. Do not force closure. Allow the closing to become visible. Mars in Pisces, its classical debilitation, operates by the same logic. Mars effective in Pisces is not the Mars that pushes, it is the Mars that stops. The will that works here is not force, it is the act of putting something down. The window that opened when Saturn and Neptune aligned in February closes at 9:23 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Not figuratively. The moon will be at exactly 28 degrees, 26 minutes of Pisces. That is a precise measurable coordinate. You are inside the last hours of that window right now. There are 3 actions. Each is tied to a specific moment between now and 9:23 p.m. Not to initiate anything. To close what is already closing, with intention rather than simply letting it disappear. 3 steps. Each tied to a specific moment. None of them require preparation, equipment, or belief. They require a piece of paper, a pen, and a willingness to do one simple thing at a precise time. The first step happens before 9:23 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Any time before that, including right now. Take a piece of paper and a pen. Not a phone, not a keyboard, paper and a pen, because the act of handwriting activates the motor cortex in a way that typing does not, and that activation deepens how the brain encodes what is written. Research by James Pennebaker at the University of Texas, documented across multiple clinical trials, established that expressive writing about unresolved experience measurably reduces intrusive thought and accelerates the closing of open narratives. Write, not a list, not bullet points, continuous prose. What is ending, not what you want, not what comes next, only what is already going. You may not be able to name it precisely. Write around it. Write what it feels like in the morning. Write what role no longer fits. Write what you've been circling for 3 weeks. 1 full page minimum. Do not reread while writing. Do not edit. Saturn and Neptune have been dissolving structure since February 20th. Dissolution without record leaves only the sensation of loss. The writing makes it a closed narrative. The brain stops cycling through what has been formally witnessed. The second step happens at exactly 9:23 p.m. Eastern, March 18th. Set a reminder before you do anything else. At 9:23 p.m., put down whatever you are holding. No phone, no music, no conversation. Sit or stand, it doesn't matter. Keep your eyes open or closed, it doesn't matter. Do nothing for 3 minutes. At that moment, the Moon, Mercury, and Mars occupy the same coordinate, 28 degrees, 26 minutes of Pisces, 3 planetary bodies at one point. This lasts only a few minutes. 3 minutes of stillness is not meditation. It is physical synchronization with a precise astronomical event, the moment when everything that has been in motion through this cycle arrives at the same location simultaneously. Your nervous system is already inside this geometry. The pause allows it to register the transition rather than move through it without noticing. The third step happens immediately after. Before you open your phone, before you speak to anyone, write 1 sentence about what is ending. No names, no details, no explanation. 1 sentence with a verb. Something like, "The version of me that needed this to work is gone." But in your words, about your thing. 2 lines at most. This is called effective labeling, a technique documented by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA in 2007. A single sentence naming an emotional state measurably reduces amygdala activation and returns regulatory function to the prefrontal cortex. Details interfere. They pull the brain back into analysis. One sentence is the boundary. After it, the narrative is closed. The brain registers it as complete. What follows is not relief, not clarity. The cycle has gone dark. You've crossed the threshold. There's nothing more to interpret tonight. What's left is not clarity. It's stillness, the kind that arrives when something stops, not when something starts. 2 days from now, on March 20th, Mercury turns direct. The same day, the Sun enters Aries. Both happen within hours of each other. What you couldn't see for 3 weeks begins to surface. That part is already in motion. Subscribe and stay close. What comes next in this sequence is not separate from tonight.